Hello, beautiful people. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Creative Habits Podcast. Welcome to another episode, and today we have a very special guest whose heritage stems from the United States and Mexico. She's a multidisciplinary artist who works as a graphic designer as well as a social media coordinator. Please welcome to the show, Natalie Jo Rogers.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I have a pretty unique background, especially kind of for the area here. My mom's Mexican, my dad's British. I was born in Mexico and kind of grew up there for the first 10 years of my life. In Mexico, I went to a Japanese school, so I always had kind of that multicultural there. And then we moved to the DC area, to Bethesda specifically, when I was 10 for my dad's job. He used to work for the World Bank. We originally only came for 1 year, and then I'm still here 15 years later. So it was always kind of like the running joke, because I would always say goodbye to my friends every single year. And I would come back the like year after. I would come back after the summer to school. So they just stopped believing me a few years into it. But yeah, I really love the area. I decided to stay here for high school, and then I thought maybe I was gonna go back to Mexico for college. Things happened where I just decided to stay here, and now I'm here working full time and doing my art and just loving it.
Very nice. So a Japanese school in Mexico, how interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your experience, just in terms of you being an artist. How did that come about? Have you always been creative?
Yeah, I've always been creative. I've always had art around me. My parents are very good at taking us to art, like all these different art galleries. There's always art in my house. Like my house growing up, every single wall had a different color. So it was always very kind of like, we were always very art centered. There's a lot of artists in the family. So we always had things that were like, we were always around art and looking at art, but I never really appreciated it much. My story is very unique in the sense that I never really took art classes. I was never like fully interested in art. It was always something I kind of took for granted. I was just around. But I always knew I wanted to be a graphic designer. So even before like I knew what it was, since I can remember, I've always said like I'm gonna be a graphic designer. I didn't know what it was, but I knew. I have a half sister. She's a graphic designer, and I guess it just kind of, I heard the word. I was like, that's what I'm gonna be. I'm super lucky. I have very supportive parents, and they always try to get me into like different art classes and things to do in relation to that to prepare me, because they knew I wanted to be a graphic designer, but I always refused. I was very focused in school and just didn't necessarily want like anything else. I did ballet growing up. I was very focused on that. So I was like, I don't want anything else. And then, yeah, I like continued through high school. I had to take an art elective in high school, and I just did photography, which doesn't necessarily relate too much to graphic design, and just, yeah. But I took photography. I like fell in love with it. Photography was kind of my first love in the art world. Ever since I was like 15, I always kind of had a camera with me. I know I got my camera for my 15th birthday. I still use that all the time, but I didn't really have anything to do with the art world until I started photography. And then when it came to like start applying for schools, I was still very hesitant, but I knew I wanted to do something with art and just graphic design. Luckily, my parents are very supportive, because I think a lot of different parents would have been like, you've never done anything related to any of this, so like, why do you want to go to school for it? I applied to a few schools. I applied to a few art schools, but then I think we all decided that maybe going to an art school wouldn't be the best in case I decided to change my mind since I didn't really do much in the art world at the beginning. But yeah, I applied to school for art, and turns out I loved it. I fell in love with a lot of different art forms. I learned a lot. I found so many things that I didn't know existed, and I'm just trying to get like do all of it and learn more and just get more involved with the art world because I really loved it, but I didn't know anything until I went to college. Like all of my beginner classes, all of my classmates have been like taking art classes like their whole life. High school, it was like all they took was art classes, maybe like the base, like the minimum requirement for all the other classes. And I arrived, I'm like, I have no idea what any of this means. Like haven't really touched the pencil to draw, but like I'm here and I want to learn everything. And yeah, it was amazing. I loved it. And now I'm super grateful that I did it, and I'm just kind of learning a lot. So I feel a little bit of an outsider sometimes because of that, but I'm enjoying the ride.
Yeah,
Great.
well, good for you. And it's great to hear that your parents are so supportive because a lot of, people don't really get that opportunity. I wanted to know because for me, I had a similar experience in terms of not really not really discovering a passion for or an interest in art because I also started off with photography. I could draw, I could paint, but really like I was more captivated with photography. And I kind of feel like for me, when I started art school, there was a fine line between graphic design and painting and drawing. Like I didn't really know what the difference was
Yeah.
with different mediums, but they had a course called Foundations the first year where you had to, it was mandatory for you to do everything. So I wanted to know because as you speak, you kind of have like a separation between graphic design and fine arts in general. So I wanted to know, like, in your opinion, what is the difference between the two? And also just to help our listeners who are getting into the arts and
Yeah.
don't necessarily know what that is. Can you explain a little bit more about what graphic design is? Is it art? Is it not art? Like what, what is it?
Yeah. I mean, definitely, I think graphic design definitely is art. But I always kind of had it separate slightly. I think graphic design you can think of it a lot kind of like more of the business. It has to do a lot with things that you see every day, but don't necessarily think of as art. So like labels and like the exit sign on like a room and little things like that where it's super important, and a lot of people like thought of it for a long time to create, and like it's very useful for us, but you don't necessarily think of it as fine art. I think it's a little bit hard to kind of compare that with like a painting,
Right.
even though they both take probably like equal amount of time, and it's just a lot of thought, and you do need a lot of creativeness for it. I I was very lucky that in the way that my college does things, if you did want to do graphic design, you first had to take every single art class that they offered. So I went in for a degree in fine arts,
Mhm.
and I thought I was just going to do graphic design. So I started taking a lot of like the intro to graphics classes. And the way that they do it is we had to do everything first, like in pen and paper. So like all of our posters and everything like that, we had to draw first,
Wow.
color them in, and then after we would take it into the computer. So that really kind of helped me merge those two worlds. And like I said, I really had to take every single art class that they offered, which really it benefited me immensely because I found a lot of things that I'm a little bit more passionate about than graphic design. But I think kind of more into the like real world, graphic design tends to be more into business, more kind of behind the computer.
Yeah,
Uh,
I guess it's more technical as well.
More
Like you have to
technical.
do a
Yeah.
lot more calculation than you would, with
Yeah.
just a general painting or, photography, it's a little bit
Yeah,
more like
definitely a lot more
calculating.
math. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
the
that's
amount of
great.
times
Yeah.
during graphics I had to like take out my calculator, and we had
Mm.
different like ways to measure and make sure everything fits, and like I enjoyed it, but I think I had an internship where pretty much all of my internship was doing posters. I just kind of got too like burnt out.
Mm.
Um and originally I did it like I was applying for a lot of graphic design jobs in the area when I first graduated. And I found out a lot of them were very like corporate. Um and it was just a lot of like presentations and pamphlets and things like that that I appreciate. And I think a lot of people are like love doing that and are very good at it, but it was not my passion. So I decided to pursue a little bit more of the fine arts in the sense of like physically doing things with like something in your hand and not just the mouse and the computer.
So, what would you say is your inspiration? And what type of art do you prefer the most to do? Because I know you do everything. You're a multidisciplinary artist, and that's lovely. But it's like, what really, makes you giddy inside or brings out the best in you?
Yeah, I think what I enjoy the most, or at least at the moment, is painting.
Mm.
I I like to do not only painting like still lifes, but also I I think my main thing is really murals. I do what I like to call doodles, where I just kind of want to put them on everything. I know murals is kind of like my biggest passion right now. I love doing them. It but it's a little bit harder to find walls. I know like my house is full of murals and like there's nowhere else I can put them. So in the meantime, I do a lot of my doodles or just regular painting. I say regular painting, but painting is more than just something you do regularly. But yeah, I'll do like canvases and still lifes or try to like recreate pictures. Um, or I'll do doodles, whether it's on like shoes or furniture, like really anything I can find. I try to customize it in some way.
Yeah, I love that. I love the patterns that you do. It reminds me of Keith Haring a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
he's one of my favorites.
yeah, so it's pretty fun. And the fact that you're putting it on, wearable pieces is pretty cool as well. I mean, guess now with wearable art, people get to experience a lot more when they have,
Hmm.
outfits and things like that, or maybe an accessory with it. But that's great. When did you start doing murals?
I started like I think maybe 7 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, I I've always done like my patterns and kind of like doodle designs without really thinking it. I kind of like I was the more I think of it, I start thinking like back to when I started it. I'm like, oh, I was actually doing that beforehand.
Right.
I remember like in high school, I would just fill up pages just like during class or when I was bored. But I never really thought of like gave it much thought until my sophomore year of college. We had to do a project, like a branding project for one of my graphic design classes. And I just started doodling. I was like, oh, this could be cool. And then I went home to Mexico for the winter holiday, and I've always kind of wanted to do something with my room because it was just like blank walls. So I asked my mom, like, hey, can I paint it? She's like, I don't know, but like, sure, you do your thing. And then I just doodled on the wall. And I really loved it. I came back to school and everyone's like, that's something that you could do. Like, that's a good
Mm.
idea. And then it just kind of picked up. I know like my brother was like, hey, can you do my wall? And then different like friends and family were just starting to ask, like, we have this wall, like, can you help us with maybe doing something like this? My parents were also super, like I say, super supportive, and they were like, oh, okay, you can do all of our walls now. Awesome. Like, let's fill the house up. And then I initially kind of started with just friends and family, and then started having a lot more like clients. and it just kind of keeps evolving. I've been super lucky, and I am so grateful for like all the support and the things that like all the possibilities that have kind of like appeared to me, and
Yeah,
I'm just very grateful.
that's fantastic. How would you say your experience has been in DC as an artist?
So far I've been super lucky. I think I do have another full-time job that's not necessarily art related.
Mhm.
Currently I'm in like social media branding, and I do a little bit of HR. Um, so I haven't necessarily been doing a lot to kind of put my services out there, but I've been super lucky in finding people that find me through Instagram and have hired me. Um, and so far, like I haven't had any horror stories. I think everyone's been super supportive. Everyone's given me the freedom to kind of choose and pick what I want to do and how I want to do things. Even clients are just like, this is kind of the base that we want, but you do what you do, and like you can do whatever you want basically. So I've been so lucky. I found a lot of good people in the area. I'm definitely kind of trying to get back into kind of the art community in the DC area. I spent a year in Mexico right before COVID.
Wow.
So I was just kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. And then I came back. I'm like, I'm gonna fully immerse myself in the art community and just find people, because I know I had a really good art network from school, but they're not really in the area. And then COVID hit, so I wasn't really able to get out there much. But no, I've had nothing but good experiences so far. I
That's
hope it
great.
stays that way, but I know I've been very lucky.
And so speaking of COVID, how have you been? Because I know like that whole year was just pretty interesting for a lot of people. But how was it for you?
It was not bad.
Hmm.
I know a lot of people had a really time, and I was lucky enough where I live with my brothers. I always had family around. At the beginning, I was feeling very like proactive and very creative. I know we like redid some parts of our house, and we painted like all the walls. We did some murals here and there. I was lucky enough to have some mural jobs during COVID as well. I was lucky enough that they were like outside, and I was able to still take them and get out of the house and do that. And then I know kind of like, I mean, it always happens, but with winter, I get a little less creative, want to maybe do a little bit less. So I kind of started getting more into business side. I started doing a lot of websites, a lot less hands-on. But now I'm trying to get back. I'm actually right now kind of redoing part of my house to be a little art studio.
Oh,
So that's
nice.
really motivating me to want to start creating a lot more.
Yeah, and I was admiring your setup in the background. And it kind of like reminded me because when I was in art school, like I can distinguish who studied what based off of like what they wore, how they organized their
Yeah.
spaces. And all the time, the graphic designers and the photographers were like the neatest. And everybody else like that had the mess was, mostly the painters or people that worked in 3D and
Yeah.
ceramics. So love the
Yeah. I mean,
background.
I have the mess in the back. You just can't see it.
Yeah, that's great. So let me see. Who are your greatest inspirations? Or like who are your greatest influences? It can be anyone, doesn't have to be an artist, but like who really motivated you to like stay the course as a creative?
Yeah. I mean, art wise, like you said, I'm very big on Keith Haring.
Hmm.
Um, there's currently an artist in New York right now, Timothy Goodman, that's also been very kind of inspiring. I think he shares a lot on Instagram, not only art related, but personal, which is very inspiring to see. Um, Personally, it's a lot of my friends and family.
Hmm.
I was very lucky to find a very good group of artists and creatives in university, and they're they're really kind of like my biggest cheerleaders. Like I'll show them something and they'll like pump me up and get me excited, and but they also like give me critiques and tell me like, oh, you need to change this. Like they're really not afraid of telling me what they think.
That's great.
And they're very good at like keeping me kind of on course. They're Yeah, I've been very lucky. They either give me projects to do or they give me ideas. They really try to keep me doing something. But also my family, like I'm very grateful for all the support. I feel like there's a little part of me where it's like I need to create and like stay within that so I can kind of thank them for all their support. I know like my parents are like, that's awesome that you have a full-time job, but like you need to also find like time for your art and do things with your art. And I'm also like super lucky where my job is a little bit more flexible, and they're all very fully aware that I do art on the side, and they're very supportive that way as well. So I feel like one is just the love for the art and want to create, but also there's so many people that are supporting me that I feel like I need to continue to kind of just thank them and like, yeah.
That's
I
really
mean, I don't
great.
have
Yeah.
to, but I just want to, like
Yeah, I
do
feel
something
that.
to be, yeah.
Definitely. And I kind of crave like that when you were talking about how you rely on your friends' feedback
Mm-hmm.
or critiques. And I really miss that about college, specifically in art school, because I know like most of the people I encounter on a day-to-day basis aren't artists as much anymore. So they'll
Yeah.
love anything that I make, but I'm like, I haven't finished this part, or like, what do you
Yeah.
really think, giving me that in-depth conversation. So it's really nice that you still have that, and that's really nice that you you are inspired by people that have always been rooting for you. So that's great. Where do you see yourself in about 5 years, or where do you want to be?
My goal is to just be like a full-time artist. I
Mhm.
think I was trying it out for maybe a year or two after graduation, and I was just not there yet. I wasn't organized enough. I didn't know enough about like pricing and kind of like the business side of being a full-time artist. So I decided to find a job external to art, learn as much as I can, absorb all the like business part of it, and figure out pricing, figure out kind of all of the details that you don't necessarily want to deal with,
Right.
so that I can at some point just focus 100% on art and like know what I'm doing and charge the right amount and make sure that I'm being taken care of in that way. I think that's kind of one of the biggest issues. And unfortunately, my school wasn't very good with kind of teaching us that part of like being an artist. So I'm also trying to figure it out now. But yeah, being a full-time artist would be awesome.
That's great. I guess you could be considered a citizen of the world, just with the different cultures that you've had, and as well as your background. But do you see yourself staying in DC, or do you have like aspirations to be somewhere else?
I would like to live in England for a little
Mm.
bit. I don't see myself living there for the rest of my life or really a long time, but I do want to experience that. I think I've always been going to England to see family and whatnot because my dad is from there, but
Mhm.
I've always wanted to kind of explore it a little bit more. I toy with the idea all the time of going back to Mexico. I love the culture there. I love the colors. It really inspires me. But at the same time, I really enjoy living in DC.
Mm.
The pace of living is a lot calmer.
Mm.
I know I have a very good support system for all my creative endeavors here, which I don't necessarily have anywhere else.
Mm.
Um, so it's an internal struggle of where I'm gonna be. But I think I'll be in DC for a good bit and then kind of figure out as I go.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, that's super awesome. I also agree that DC is one of the best places for art. I think it's less busy than New York or
Yeah.
London. I was also raised back and forth between here and London, but
Okay,
also
that's awesome.
Zimbabwe. I'm originally from Zimbabwe, so I can definitely relate to that. But yeah, I mean, DC is, when you get to know the art scene, it's much smaller than, people assume that it is.
Yeah.
Like everyone literally knows everyone, or at some point you're going to cross another artist that's doing the same thing. So I definitely love that about it. And I love that Smithsonian's are free and you can
Yeah, that's
always
one of the
go.
biggest.
Yeah. So that's always an awesome thing. But I love the diversity of the artists in DC. That's
Mhm.
always a great thing. Um, let's see. We have about 10 minutes. So I wanted to know if you'd like to play a game. We
Yeah.
usually end off with a game with all of our listeners. It's called This or That.
Okay.
And you just pretty much pick what you would prefer out of the two choices. So they're pretty generic questions. Some of them are a little bit random, but you can choose
Okay.
whichever
Let's do
answer
it.
you're comfortable with. Okay, so the first one is pancakes or waffles.
Pancakes.
Okay. The next one is TV or social media.
TV.
Okay. The other one is painting or spending the day at the beach.
Painting.
The next one is traveling by bus or traveling by train.
By train, I think.
Great. Well, that was it for the game, but I wanted to know, since we have so many listeners that are interested in becoming artists or are currently in school to become an artist, a
Mhm.
full-time or part-time artist, what would your advice be for your younger self or someone that's just trying to get into the arts, whether it's graphic design or fine art?
I would say try to find a group of people that are doing the same thing and
Mhm.
just absorb as much as possible. A lot it can be very scary to enter a new world where you may know a lot and you may not know anything. But I found I like you just need to be willing to try and absorb it and go to every market, go to
Mm.
all the museums, just spend hours at museums or at like a holiday market. Like there's so much art around us that you don't necessarily think of um or realize that it's just you just have to like open your eyes wide and just look everywhere, stare at everything, absorb everything. Um and then go home and think about it and kind of like break it down. And yeah, I think I I didn't know the art world was as big and there was so much that made it until I just went out and absorbed it and then found a lot of different things that I like a lot more than what I began with. Um so yeah, just be open to anything, meeting
Definitely.
people, everything like that.
Fantastic. And what is a quote that has stuck with you?
Um there's not like one specific one, but I I can't think of a specific one. I'm one of the few people I think that kind of when they look at something, I very subconsciously try to mimic it.
Mm.
So I try to kind of keep a distance from looking at a lot of art or like quotes and things like that when I'm creating. So I don't try to mimic it unintentionally. But also I just have a very bad memory. So like a lot of things like I'll take in and then I like forget. So like art history, it was a very hard time for me
Ugh.
because I just like I got the gist, but like a lot of the specific things, like I can't remember. I
Yeah.
tried, but my memory cannot compute with that.
Yeah, but I can concur and agree that that was a lot of information for art history. I feel like they need to reel it back and kind of give it in small doses. But what is currently on your playlist? What do you like to listen to?
I listen to a lot of Spanish music,
Mhm.
so a lot of reggaeton, a lot of just happy music. I try to be take in a lot of happy things and produce happy things. I think kind of like that's my main motivator, to just feel something, and something positive. So currently, I think one of my biggest artists is one, he's called Camilo. It's all in Spanish. It's all very kind of like happy music, a lot of pop, um, a few folk pop songs. It's mostly kind of reggaeton, kind of things that want to kind of like get your body moving.
Yeah, very awesome. So I was also curious, how many languages do you speak?
Fluently only Spanish and
Mhm.
English. I did take a lot of, well, I took Japanese classes growing up, but I did forget a good amount. I didn't necessarily follow up when I moved here. So I can still read it, but I can't fully understand. I also took about 10 years of French, so I
Mm,
can speak a little bit, but I wouldn't say fluent by any
yeah.
means. And I also dabbled for a few years in Chinese.
Oh, very cool. So I always ask my bilinguals or my multilingual people, do you dream in Spanish or English?
It really depends.
Mm-hmm.
Same with my thinking. I think if I'm speaking in English a lot, I tend to think in English.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Same with my dreams, but I guess it kind of depends on like what's the last language I heard right
Yeah,
before I went to bed.
that's quite
Um,
funny. Yeah. Because I mean,
and
I used to
same.
be, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I used to be fluent in my native tongue, which is Shona, and as well
Okay.
as English. But I used to think in that language and also dream
Yeah.
in that language. But now that I'm like in America and like, immersed with all English speakers, like that has disappeared for me. But
Yeah.
occasionally I'll like find myself thinking in the language, but not as much as before. So I'm always curious to ask people that speak more than one language, like, how do you think or how do you dream or do you do things
Yeah.
like, does it kind of pop up, and what language kind of do you speak more than the other?
Yeah. I think it really depends on kind of what language I'm speaking.
Mm,
I know like when my parents are in town because they live in Mexico, I speak a lot more Spanish.
yeah.
So I tend to forget a lot of like English words. Or like if I spend like more than 2 weeks in Mexico, I come back, I'm like, I forgot how to speak English.
Yeah.
And then it comes kind of goes the same way the other way. Uh, if I mean, I'm lucky I speak in Spanish with my brothers. I always kind of had that going on, but like at school, I would sometimes be like, oh, I need to freshen up here. I need to
Yeah.
start speaking more Spanish because,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, even it goes with the accents. Like if I'm in Africa, like my accent would somehow change. Also, when I'm in
yeah,
England, because I've been back and forth in England since I was 2 and would stay like over the course of 3 or 4 months. So I'd find
yeah,
like myself kind of like adjusting the accent for the
yeah.
environment
Like
that
you
I'm in.
change certain words as well.
Exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's always been interesting to me to like talk to other people that are from other places. But Natalie, it's been such a pleasure. Before we go, I wanted to know if you can please share with everyone your social media and your website if they're interested in purchasing something or networking with you in any sort of way.
Yeah. My Instagram is at nat_joe_art. And then my website is nataliejo.rogers.com. I currently don't have anything that I'm kind of selling. I'm in the process of figuring out what I want to create that I can take out to the world, but I would love to network. I'm always trying to find people to talk to and people to learn from. So if you want to come and say hi, I would love to say
Yeah,
hi and just continue the conversation.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this podcast episode. We hope to see you in the future and hope to just see what you're doing, and all the best to you.
Thank you. Same as well. I'm honored to be on here.
Yeah, lovely.
Thank you.
Well, that will be the end of it. And we usually do like have the episodes maybe a month or so after we've interviewed people. But I can send you a message when it's done. And also, like, we sometimes do a video component if you're comfortable with it. So would that be something that you're comfortable with if we have the video version kind of online?
Yeah, I'm sure I'll print
Okay.
that myself, but that's nothing
Yeah.
new.
I
Go
always
for
do.
it.
Like, I always try to get my boyfriend to do the interviews because I'm a little camera shy, but we've been trying to work out the balancing with sharing
Yeah.
duties. So, like, I try to do my part. And then another thing is, can you send a few images so that we can put it in the video, kind of like when we're talking about your work, so they can kind of
Yeah.
see what we were referencing.
Yeah, I'll send a
Okay.
few of kind of just my art and maybe things that inspire me.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I don't want to take up too much of your Sunday, but I really appreciate you for doing this for us.
No worries. I appreciate it. It was very good. It was nice to kind of talk more and nice to hear that we have kind of a few things in common. I'm not
Yeah.
kind of the only one. So that's awesome.
Definitely. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with DC Murals online, where they host commissions and things like that. Do you know about it?
I I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I think I've heard about it. I haven't
Mhm.
fully explored it yet. I do see kind of few proposals here and there, but
Yeah, definitely go for it because a lot of people don't. So they are
okay.
willing to like throw money at you.
Oh,
So I
awesome.
know a lot of people in the program right now, and they're like, you have to do it. I will be doing one soon. Not for DC, but
Oh,
Hyattsville, Maryland.
that's
So they
awesome.
have one. Yeah. So I mean, if you want to do a mural for DCPS, I mean, not for DC Commission for
Yeah.
the Arts, like I should go for it.
Yeah, I will definitely look into it. I have a little bit of an issue with with some ways that people do proposals.
Mm,
I I don't know if you follow, there's this website called I guess it's more like an Instagram account. They're called
mhm.
Pander. They do a lot of murals, but they host an account called Ladies Who Paint.
Okay.
Um,
I'm gonna write
and
it down
they
so I don't forget. Uh-huh.
yeah, for Ladies to Paint Who Paint, they do an annual like mural festival
Mhm.
where they bring people from like you apply, and then if they pick they take you to San Diego where they are, and they just give you like all the materials and everything to paint a mural.
Oh wow.
They like